Hello everyone, so this is another Renee Regards video. I'm going to aim to make this one a lot shorter because I'm sure everyone was pissed off by the length of the Jane Eyre discussion. But there was a lot to talk about with Jane Eyre. Equally speaking, there probably could be a lot to talk about with this one too. But I'll put my Phantom discussion of the Susan Kay novel, I'll link that in the video in my pants, because I'll probably reference it in this video. I already have done. Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. A very worthwhile classic, easily one of my favourites, for very different reasons, interestingly enough, as to why I'm a Phantom fan of the other many, many incarnations of this story, especially the stage musical. I love the stage musical, love it, love it, love it, and I also love the Y&K stage musical too, the Coppet and Yeston stage musical. If you do not know that one, look it up. Awesome songs in there, completely different story, but fantastic songs. But Gaston Leroux's novel is so very different in many, many ways from every other version that has arisen from this here original piece. When you say Phantom of the Opera, for the most part people have associations with the musical and with that storyline and that presentation of those characters. Gaston Leroux's novel is not that in many ways. If I was going to give this a genre that it belonged to, it's probably mystery slash a bit of horror. And there is romance in it, but it is certainly not at the forefront of the story. It is a mystery, and that's what it's set up to be. And I think that, you know, they've really all the subsequent adaptations have taken the romance side of it and expanded it to kind of cover the rest of the content of the book. And obviously there's been so many plot changes and things in all the other adaptations that it doesn't really count. I still think, though, this is a really worthwhile, really entertaining, really enjoyable read, even though it doesn't have that kind of immediate appeal of having the really romantic side of things going on. Also, the characters aren't anywhere near as... Really, I don't think anywhere near as cardboard cutout-y in this version. I actually, at the end of the day, I think I appreciate the three central characters in this version probably more than in any other one, maybe except Susan Kay's Phantom. Simply because I think they're actually more dynamic and more interesting and more varied and diverse in this original version. For example, in almost every other incarnation of this story, I hate Raoul. I just do. And it's not just because I am an Eric and Christine shipper, more on that later, but because I think that he's been taken and put into the mold of the romantic hero who's out to save the day and be the really idealized vision of a romantic hero. And so that often kind of gives him some quite douchebaggy traits, and he becomes a bit pompous, he becomes a bit arrogant, he becomes a bit controlling, he becomes some things that aren't too nice, but he's still meant to be the positive, I guess, in this triangle. Whereas in this book I just see him as being a much more realized and three-dimensional human being of a character, because he's so very confused, the poor boy, and lost, and desperately trying to make things right and fix things and solve what's going on, and he's very much fumbling his way throughout the book trying to sort the shit out. And in all honesty, if I had to say that I think this book has a protagonist, I would actually say it's Raoul. Other people may disagree, and that's totally fine. But I think we're actually following his journey more than anybody else's in this book, because for the most part, whenever Christine has encounters with Eric, we don't see them. They're mentioned, and they've already occurred. Like her 2 weeks spent underground in the lair, we're not there for it. We just hear about it in retrospect after it's happened. And it's Christine telling Raoul. So I really do think that Raoul, I term him as the protagonist of this story. Not Eric, because Eric's not even in it for the most part. Eric's only really featured heavily right towards the end. Yeah, so Raoul for me is the one that you focus on the most in this book, and I genuinely feel so sorry for the guy, because he's just trying to sort out what's going on, and he's so lost and confused, and just trying to do the right thing, and he genuinely really cares for Christine. I don't see it as this sort of sense of ownership and entitlement that has come into a lot of the other adaptations, even if it wasn't intended. I think that often the performances and the way in which the character is written I don't know, it just comes across as I feel a bit uneasy with it, which is saying something given the relationship between Christine and Eric. But Raoul, he's really endearing and genuine and sweet, I think, in this book, and I really like him a lot. Christine, I actually like in some ways more than in any other incarnation as well in this book. She's surprisingly feisty. Like, she has moments where, especially where Raoul's like trying to question her and say, what's going on? Where she's openly saying, just shut up, Raoul, and leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. I'm doing my own stuff, and it's none of your business. Like, she openly says that to him. And she doesn't do that in any other version, and I really like the fact that she's kind of like doing my own thing because I wanna, and I'm sorting my stuff out, and she kind of, in some ways, comes across as a little bit quite childish and naive and sometimes bratty, but I think that the fact that she still holds true to the fact that she knows what she's doing and she's doing it for her own reasons and it's her own decision. I really like that. Honestly, I don't get that sense nearly as strongly from any other version of this character. So I really admire that, and I like that you do. I mean, I genuinely care about her well-being in this book because she is so much. I think she's painted as being much more naive in this original version than she is in any of the others. Even though she's still quite self-aware and she knows what she's doing for her own reasons. I think that she's still. You're reminded in this book more than any of the others, I think, of how young she is and how sheltered her life was and how codependent her relationship with her father was and how much that does influence the psychology behind what she's doing with Eric and what their relationship is. And that leads, of course, into the inevitable discussion of Eric in this book. He's a mess. He's a mess. He's also very elusive because we don't really get to know the guy until the end. And even then, it's very brief. For a book called The Phantom of the Opera isn't actually in it that much. And so, yeah, I feel like he's quite an enigma in this story, and I think that's probably why so many of the other versions have decided he would be the focus, and they're going to expand his character more, because I have so many lingering questions about him. So much of what we know is provided through other characters, through Christine, and through like what the rumblings of other people, of Meg and Madame Giry, and the owners of the opera house, those who live in the opera house, and ultimately the Persian, who's very interesting, and I like him. And I'm glad that he got expanded really well in Susan Kay's novel, because I was really genuinely curious about him too. But Eric is primarily told through hearsay, and what we learn of him at the end is it's such a precise, distinct moment in his journey that even that glimpse into his character is really it's just so specific and small that it doesn't paint a fully realized picture of the guy. It just makes you more curious. I think it still engenders a lot of sympathy for him, but you still never get the sense that you actually knew exactly who he was, which I think adds well and is beneficial to the overall mystery of the book, and the fact that, you know, the book ends with the question of whether or not the opera ghost really existed, which is how it starts. And so it keeps the fact that he remains elusive and really ambiguous is beneficial to, I think, the overall tone that Leroux was going with for the novel. But it's 100%, if there's one thing that's clarified throughout the book, it is that Eric is 100% not entirely sane. He's a bit off his rocker, and his behaviour is never painted as anything other than homicidal and dangerous and wrong. And I think that is one of the key things about this book that I actually appreciate, is the fact that it's never questioning whether or not what Eric does is right or wrong. It's clearly on the side of this guy is a criminal and a murderer and insane, and he needs help. And so you recognise his genius, certainly. I mean, all the quintessential aspects of what he is good at are contained throughout the book. The fact that he is obviously a really skilled composer, he's very good with magic tricks, he's a fantastic architect, and all of those things also make you question more about his backstory and how the heck he has all these skills. But at the same time, he's nuts and he's killing people, and there's no denying that at all. And so that I think that also makes his tiny revelation at the end of the book that much more poignant as well, because you've had such a negative picture being painted of this guy, when you see him break down, it's that much more heartbreaking and also just strange to see, because you still feel like you don't actually know who he is, but you know you feel really bad for him, and you probably wouldn't want to be in a room with the guy for too long. I really like the fact that you get a really strong sense of Paris at this particular point in time, and the architecture and the feel of being within the opera house is really created very vividly, and I think the atmosphere of the book is fantastic, and it makes me all that more keen to finally one day get to Paris so I can go to the Opera Garnier and look around, because I know they let you, and you can look into box 5 and stuff, and I just want to do that! And I want to go to the catacombs, even though I'd freak the hell out. I don't think you can, but I would love to go down there if I could. Yeah, the atmosphere of the book is fantastic, and I just think the characters are interesting, and the relationships are so much more, in some ways, complex than I think all the other versions have painted them as being. It's kind of, in some ways, even though the story is quite small, and it has been expanded upon in all the versions, I think to some extent it's also been watered down, which is a shame. And I think that to appreciate the Phantom of the Opera legacy, it is essential to go back and read the original if you have not. But if you're familiar with the other versions, certainly try and grab this and have a read of it, because you'll be surprised. It's very, very different in a lot of ways, but still a really worthwhile read. And yeah, I think Gaston Leroux would be very interested and confused probably by what his story has become. But yeah, definitely, if you can, pick it up and give it a read. Meanwhile, this cover is completely incorrect because it's taking the two things that are most known for the from the musical version. The rose is not featured at all in this book, and he wears a full mask and a half mask, but, you know, whatever, it's still a nice cover. So that's Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Give it a read!